the recording. And welcome once again to a talk within the nine-sided circle with your hosts.
Noor Kyle and...
That's not Noor Kyle.
I think, yeah, you gotta like...
There you go.
Someone sneezed or something.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes. All right, yes. So yep, me, Noor Kyle,
and Mushtaq Ali.
Yep.
Coming to you again from beautiful downtown planet Earth, the garden spot of the galaxy. So tonight, we're going to talk about the concept of entertainment and what one has to do with that. I would like to suggest to you that the need to be entertained is nearly addictive in a whole lot of people. And this is not like, oh, I need to go to the movies, or oh, I need to watch my favorite soap opera. But if you are walking down the street, just being present, your mind is going to start jonesing for a distraction. You ever notice that? You're just doing anything, walking down the street, riding your bicycle, driving your car, sitting in your house. And if your mind is just present, it's going to start feeling uncomfortable. Show of hands. Who has ever had this happen to them? Yeah, that's pretty much everybody here.
Yeah, pretty much everyone.
So, I would like to suggest to you that what you are experiencing is a form of withdrawal symptom. That we have, as a species, distracted ourselves so much for so much of our lives that we become extraordinarily uncomfortable when we hop out of that groove and start being present. I think that this is one of the biggest initial stumbling blocks to the work of being present in the world, of being awake, is this need to have your brain constantly being distracted. And if you think about it, what are you distracting yourself from? Any thoughts?
Well, it's just the here and now, right?
Yeah, Ilmar, what's up?
Lay it on us, Omar.
It's essentially the here and now, right?
Yes. The present moment, the actual existing in the moment of the experience, as opposed to the past, the future, or a fantasy world.
But what's stressful about the present moment?
That's a good question. What is stressful about the present moment? Why do we not want to be there? It certainly seems to me that most of us, most of the time, put a lot of effort in not being in the present moment, of distracting ourselves from it.
Well, one theory is previous trauma, which I think is a lot of it, but it's probably not the whole story.
It can't be the whole story because, I mean, me walking down the street, just being in my environment is not evoking any trauma in me. And I brought this up because yesterday I went to the store. There's an IKEA like 5 or 6 blocks away, and I needed a couple of things. Big mistake. And so I went into the IKEA and I got lost in the IKEA vortex for hours, wandering through the maze, trying to find my way back out again. And there's only one path that gets you out, and you have to find it.
Very mysterious sounding.
Very mysterious sounding. And you go buy all of these tempting things, like a kilo of frozen Swedish meatballs for $6. The worst part about it is that it was on the other side of the checkout stand. So I was looking at it, standing in the checkout stand for a half an hour, longing for the Swedish meatballs, which I knew I was not going to get because I had to go back to the checkout stand after I had checked out. It was very frustrating. And so I finally found my way out of the store, which is not easy because the store does not have an entrance to the outside or an exit to the outside. It literally exits in a parking garage. And there is no way to walk out through a door and be outside from this IKEA.
So there's no pedestrian entrance and exit?
There's no pedestrian entrance whatsoever. And I know because I looked everywhere for it. And so in walking home, as I usually do, I do my walking meditation where I'm just being in the present moment, and I could feel my brain trying to force me into some sort of thought pattern that would be entertaining. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to just be here on this walk. And my brain is going, no, 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 think of this, think of that. Think of what's going to happen tomorrow. Think about that TV show that you like. Think about all of this. And I'm going, shut up. And it's going, no, no, look, over here, look, look, it's a bird. And I'm watching this happen, and I'm actually looking at the grooves that have been worn in my mind through distraction and how easy it is to fall into them. And that's when I realized that the need to distract yourself through entertainment is a form of addiction, right down to the withdrawal symptom, which is an extreme discomfort if you let it go for a while. At least that's my working theory for the moment. Change my mind if you'd like to.
So is it really a need for entertainment, or is it a habit that evolved for whatever the hell reason? We can explore that, and that one just simply drifts back into this habit. I mean, I see them almost as mental, what do you call them? As processes, and these are habitual processes that, whose content may change, but one of those is, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to react to this situation in the future, and sometimes those actions are useful, right? I mean, plotting out how
sometimes going to the movies are useful too.
Right. But so it seems to me often that it's not so much entertainment as it's kind of habitual behavior patterns or processes that are.
Why do we go to be entertained? Why do we go to a movie? Why do we sit down in front of a television set? Why do we go to a symphony? None of these things are either good or bad. But why do we do it?
Well, some of it's for strong altered states of consciousness, but a lot of it's much milder than that.
And almost all of it is to distract you. So my working hypothesis at the moment is that all of these things that you have just described, Ilmar, are forms of entertainment.
Okay, define entertainment. What exactly do you mean by entertainment?
That's what I just.
There's certainly processes that are going on.
Entertainment is something that distracts you from whatever else is going on and engages you.
So would you call an intentional? Would you call an intentional engagement with something a distraction? Like, let's say I go to a symphony because I want to hear the Beethoven string quartets again. Okay, do you it's not, I don't consciously think of that as being a distraction. I think I'm going there for a certain aesthetic, primarily aesthetic experience, you know.
And I think that that's a distraction.
Okay, so that's why I'm trying to get the sense of what you mean by distraction, then, because it's not like, at least I'm not consciously trying to avoid something by going to that concert. Rather, my primary intent is to experience a certain aesthetic process. You know, in this case, a string quartet, or it could be
like I said, it is not necessarily good or bad. But it does pull you away from being present most of the time. Though with something like a Beethoven string quartet, you can sit there and be present with the movie. With the music. So that may not be the best example of entertainment. Beethoven may not actually be entertainment.
Okay, so that's why I guess I'm trying to get a handle of what you mean by entertainment and what you mean by distraction. Then, yeah, because certainly some of the things that I do and some of the things that happen in my mind even are useful, and I intentionally engage in them. Not
say it wasn't useful, just said it was distraction.
I know, but I'm still trying to get you to study what you mean by distraction in a non-circular way. You know?
I did.
It seems like there's this negative connotation being attached to the word distraction. And I think in this context where we're valuing a being present in the now, right, distraction can take on a negative connotation. But if we're looking at it in terms of just in general, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But if we're going to discuss the difference between seeking the now and seeking to have our consciousness altered and caught up in an experience, that's something a little bit different.
Yeah. It's almost like if you're intentionally putting your attention on something, as opposed to automatically having your attention pulled to something, that seems to me.
If you're intentionally putting your attention on something while remaining present, you're not being distracted.
Right.
Now, and there's a certain amount of chronic attached to this as well. So people will chronically be finding ways to skip out on the present moment.
Sure.
So I have a relevant example. When I was in high school, I was that kid who I would be out with my friends and I'd have earbuds or headphones on because I'd be listening to a CD while in the car with my friends who are interested in listening to music as well, but they want to listen to something I'm not feeling right now. So I'm pulling myself out of the present moment to turn inward rather than being present with my companions.
But are you then intentionally being present with your particular music?
That may be true in a sense, but at the same time, it was an escapism. It was kind of a disengagement from what was happening around me.
I mean, I certainly recognize that. I mean, sometimes, often in my case at least, it happens that I wind up doing something not intentionally, basically as a way, in retrospect, of avoiding some situation I'm in. You know, I mean, that certainly happens. I don't disagree with that at all.
There was definitely something habitual about it in that I was addicted to my music, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the feeling. Like, I hungered for it when I wasn't listening to it. And I allowed it to, I guess we could say, to dictate my behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I had been consciously choosing, I might have said to myself, you know what, I really miss listening to that song right now. I have it stuck in my head, but it's okay. There'll be time for that later.
Yeah. So it seems like it's the presence or absence of conscious choice that's really a critical issue here.
I think there's...
Well, that would be kind of the definition of being distracted. Now, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what I'm trying to pin down. What exactly do you mean by being distracted? So,
Well, I know what I mean. So
also enlighten us.
and I mentioned before that a distraction is something that takes you away from the present moment and turns you usually inward, and steals your attention.
Well, here's one from today, which is I was reading a really pretty good short story, and I kept taking a break to check on Facebook.
Mm.
So I'm being distracted from my distraction.
Yeah.
Yes, that's also a thing. Yeah, I mean, that's the chronic quality of it in certain ways, especially with something like Facebook, or in my case, listening to my favorite music on a compulsive kind of, in a compulsive sort of way. Yeah.
Is there something in this about no satiation?
That is a very good question.
No association. Sorry, I missed the
No
word.
satiation.
No satiation. No.
Yes.
Not being satiated, is that
Okay.
what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you never feel like you've had enough and you're satisfied and you don't need more right now?
Yeah. I mean, because Facebook is kind of like that, right? Like it's hard to have a sense of doneness because things are always popping up and you refresh and there's a whole bunch of new stuff that could be looked at. In my case, I mean, I could listen to the same song over and over again and it would still be like, yeah, but I want to hear it again. I want to taste it again. Or sugar. In my case, the only thing that makes me stop is usually that I feel sick. So if I could choose consciously, I will stop before feeling sick, right? But there's definitely a difference between feeling satisfied and feeling what's the word I'm looking for? Aversion to discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly possible to get satiated with the present moment.
Is it?
Well, it feels that way. Maybe it's not.
Maybe that's the sign of what we're talking about. It's so easy to, well, when we're really present with the present moment, it's boundless. It's boundlessly entertaining.
Entertaining?
That's true. That's yeah, you got me there. Okay. But I mean, there's so much in it to unpack. It's kind of like, well, it's not even about the unpacking, is it, at that point?
No, it's about the direct experience.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And in order to get to that, you have to get through the withdrawal of needing to be entertained by whatever it is that distracts you. Which is why I say something like the music of Beethoven or Bach or Brahms or any of those composers that start with B.
Mm-hmm.
The B-boys.
Yeah, their music is at a level that you can be present with it, and that's an interesting thought, that you can juxtapose that between, say, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony versus the Bee Gees, since we're sticking with B.
But not the Beatles, right?
Not that, well, actually.
I mean, I think there is a sense of nuance in this, in that for different people, different things are going to give them that sense of presence.
Yeah. Early Beatles might as well have been the Bee Gees, except that they had a different style.
Yeah.
They went through a period where they were trying to produce music that reflected the present moment. And one of the things about, say, Beethoven, who was admittedly one of my favorite composers, his music can often bring you to that present moment. But I don't experience that with a lot of music. Some of it, yes. Some of it, no. And it doesn't have to be symphonic. I mean, I have the same experience with flamenco, with classical Persian music. Yeah, but top 40 won't do it for me.
Is that because of the music or because of your attitude towards that music?
I have a suspicion that it may actually be because of the music.
Really? Because one of the things that intrigued me back in my many years ago, you know, when I tried some pot and stuff like that, is that even trite music suddenly became fascinating, you know.
Yeah, fascinating.
The same music.
But not necessarily in the same way.
Not in the same way, but what changed was me, not the music. And something.
Now, I'm trying to remember which book it was. One of George Leonard's books. One of his earlier books. He talked about a series of experiments that were done with people listening to different musics and pushing a button in such a way that it picked up their micro movements on the push. And with at least some music, and it was mostly the symphonic stuff, when people pushed the button, they made the same micro movements through, you know, like 100, 150 different people. It's been years since I read the study, but it kind of stuck with me as, there's something objective here.
There was a guy named Manfred Kleins who did a bunch of work about this. And he had a classical music background as well as science. He got interested because he found that I think people gestured similarly to the same music or something. He found people had characteristic movements for different emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And this was worldwide and cross-cultural. But I don't remember anything of his about different kinds of music, so I don't know.
Yeah, and this gets into Gurdjieff's idea of objective art versus subjective art. But that's a topic for a different day, I think. So we won't touch on that too much other than to acknowledge that the topic is there.
I mean, I can get pretty good levels of attention for music that I'm nostalgic about.
Music
but is it attention in the present moment?
Yeah, or is it more attention to the memories and the feelings that are evoked by?
I think I'm feeling current enjoyment of something I used to like.
Yeah, I think in order to understand that, I think we would have to do some serious unpacking on it to see exactly what is going on. Because if I do that, then what happens to me, if I listen to like something that I really liked when I was, say, 18, it will take me back to being 18. It will distract me from the present moment.
Yeah, my memories of the past are frequently not that vivid. And so I am sitting here now listening to Walk Like an Egyptian. Speaking of, things that begin with B.
Okay.
But so Mustafa, I understand your main point, I thought, was that a lot of the stuff that happens kind of involuntarily, when you're going for your walk back home, is a withdrawal symptom from withdrawing from a particular addiction, it sounded like,
And it kind of is. I consider boredom, the experience of boredom, to be a withdrawal symptom.
And withdrawal from a particular, I guess you would say from a particular pattern of distraction, which you were.
A particular pattern of distraction which has to do with entertainment. When you're bored, what do you want?
To be distracted and entertained, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. If you are bored, being in the present moment, just sitting and being, is not going to distract you from that boredom. It's not going to pull you away from the boredom, at least not at first. The boredom is urging you to something.
And so the boredom is what you would call the withdrawal symptom here.
Yes.
And it's a withdrawal from what?
What?
From being continuously entertained? Is that what you would say?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think this is especially noticeable, or even maybe even more difficult to notice these days, because our sources of entertainment and distraction are almost endless at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that we experience, many of us, I'm not going to say all of us, but I think many of us experience sharper feelings of boredom when, say, we lose electric power and can't get on the computer, or our phones aren't working, or anything like that.
Or have to ride on BART.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. If someone has to go on the train, they're usually fiddling with the cell phone or listening to music or something.
Yeah, or both.
Or both.
Interestingly enough, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of times that I've looked around me and everybody is playing a game on their cell phones is more than I can count.
So not only do I think that our ability to tolerate that feeling of, you know, that empty-handed bored feeling is more difficult to tolerate now, but we also experience it in a lot of ways less now, because it's so easy to pick up the things that distract and entertain us. Does that make sense?
The methadone is easily available.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's easy to be in denial about an addiction when those things that are addicting are so easily available. And so, I mean, we're making it sound like it's like, I don't want to push the metaphor too far, but I'm just saying that because it's so easy to pick up a cell phone and start playing a game or surf the internet, we don't realize how dependent we are on that ability to escape into those activities.
And we have to ask ourselves, what do those activities take us away from?
Well, I would say that paying attention to the present moment can take an effort of will, and that's work, and you get tired.
Yeah, but only because you're out of practice doing it.
I was just going to say, we lack the muscles for it now.
Yeah.
Many of us do. Yeah.
I mean, this was apparent to me yesterday, because I had spent literally 3 hours in this store being exhausted by having to deal with being trapped in IKEA and not being able to get to the Swedish meatballs, no matter what.
I was wondering whether that increased your vulnerability somehow.
I think that it probably did, because I really love kattebuller. I mean, delicious stuff, especially when made properly. And I have not had a good Swedish meatball in over a year. I had one Swedish friend back in Michigan who would occasionally make them for me.
So our will muscles are weak in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was noticing myself getting distracted standing in the line. Usually when I stand in a line, I'm just there, and I'm aware of my surroundings, and I'm just hanging out. But after about 20 minutes of standing in this line, it literally took over. It was about 45 minutes to get from when I got to the back of the line to when I got to the checkout. I kept looking up and seeing Swedish meatballs, 2.2 pounds for $6.99, frozen, and over again. And it would make me think of, sitting in Stockholm and eating a Swedish meatball sandwich, that's made open-faced with a layer of cream cheese and a layer of meatballs and a layer of beets and all of the good stuff. And just, I would think of that and I would start thinking of all of the places that I had that in Stockholm, and then all of the places that I had that in the United States. And the times that I've done without. When I moved away from home, there was this long period of time where I didn't get Swedish meatballs, and it was a tragedy.
Very sad.
Very sad. But then I moved to Sweden, and I could get Swedish meatballs every day if I wanted them. And that was very good. And you see how I get lost in the thought? Do you get a sense of how that just runs you right away from the present moment, being lost in that train of thought. And Swedish meatballs will do that for you.
But was that entertaining? See, I guess
that was totally entertaining.
It was entertaining, yeah, but I guess it still seems to me that your last Sunday's talk about addiction, I thought it was last Sunday at least.
It was last Sunday, yes.
Yeah. There we had the notion of being addicted in a particular way to something, and then withdrawal symptoms when that was no longer available popping up. Okay.
Yeah, and you have something of the same thing here.
But now, what is the one thing here that we're
a particular
creating
form of distraction that takes you away from the present moment?
Is it the vocabulary that's frustrating you, Omar?
No, it's the vagueness of it's frustrating. It seems to me that there's something.
I could sit here and name distraction 1, distraction 2, distraction 3, distraction 4, distraction 5, distraction 6, and then I wouldn't be vague. But since there is an infinite number of distractions, we wouldn't get much else done.
Yeah.
I gave you one example of how a distraction would work in my narrative of the Swedish meatball.
Yeah.
So let ye with ears hear.
The present moment just doesn't come naturally to people. That's why there's meditation and so on.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Why does the present moment not come naturally to people? And when did it start not coming naturally to people? Because from the literature, it looks to me like there have been times when it did come naturally, or at least more naturally than now.
And so there are certainly also times where one, at least I sometimes get into this state of consciousness where that is the natural way to be. I don't necessarily stay in that state, but it does in some fundamental sense seem to be the natural way that we as human beings are. We're just kind of present in the situation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the natural state.
Right.
That the distracted state is not the natural state.
And so really the question is, why, where do we first start craving this way of avoiding being present?
Let's look at when we might use that. Now, as a hypnotherapist, I will tell you that I use distraction all the time, or I did back when I was practicing. For instance, let me tell you a story. I used to teach hypnosis, Ericksonian rapid model hypnosis and hypnotherapy at a small college in Northern California as part of their psychology program. And this college was tucked back away in the mountains up in Humboldt County. And it was in a very rural setting. It was basically a live-in place. You didn't live in the town and go to the college to go to school, because the nearest town was a 2-hour drive from the college. So people who went to this college lived on campus. And it's rural, very rugged. And one day, one of the women who was a student in the school was walking down this hill, and she slipped and she broke her leg. Spiral fracture of the tibia and fibula. Tibia and fibula? Yes. And as you can imagine, she was in massive pain. And somebody literally came running into the classroom as I was lecturing and said, "You have to come, and you have to come now. This woman is yelling for you." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." And I went out there, and she was laying on the ground, and she was basically weeping in pain. Now, as a hypnotherapist, I know that I can make that pain go away. And she knew too, because she was one of my students. And so I started talking to her, and I started doing an induction, and I embedded the induction in a story. And basically what I did was I distracted and dissociated her from her pain, so that we were able to load her onto a stretcher in the back of a van and drive her 2 hours to the nearest hospital where she could get her legs set. And during the whole time, I was just sitting there talking to her, telling her a story and another story and another story, and layering one story onto the next, until the next thing you knew, we were at the hospital, and she was not feeling pain during the whole trip. And that was done entirely by distraction and entertainment. My stories can be very entertaining. Ask anyone. Ask me, I'll tell you. So, possibly one way that we have developed this habit of distraction is because it is an analgesic.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes to what Nancy was saying about trauma. Is if your choice is to experience trauma in the present moment or to be entertained by losing the present moment, you might choose the entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't take feeling traumatized. The trauma could be way background.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's truth in that. I think that there's a lot about our culture right now that is isolating and painful, financially, economically in general, socially, physiologically. There are lots of ways in which we might be motivated to want to disengage, to dissociate, to be distracted.
And I suspect that religion has played a major part in this over the centuries. Think about being a medieval peasant. Being a medieval peasant sucks. When it comes to life paths, it is not one that would be recommended to anyone unless you really didn't like them. And so the lot of a medieval peasant, a serf, basically a slave, because a serf belongs to the land upon which he works, and the land belongs to the Lord of the manor. And so here you have this guy whose life is utterly miserable, and he's got very few relief from that misery, one of which is beer. During medieval times, beer was incredibly popular and consumed in huge amounts by everybody, for a couple of different reasons. One, you wouldn't necessarily die from cholera by drinking beer, but you would from the water. The alcohol in the beer sterilizes the liquid. The process of making beer sterilizes the liquid. So you have beer, you have getting drunk, and you have church, where you go in and the priests tell you stories about how good life is going to be at some future time after you're dead, when you will go to your reward and the evil people will be punished. Think about that. If that happened for your whole life and you told yourself those stories over and over again, here you are slaving in the fields, and to get away from the suffering that you were experiencing slaving in the fields, you retell that story to yourself over and over and over again. Is that not distraction and entertainment? So this is one way that this might have become a human habit.
And in that sense, it's utterly normal.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be in pain.
But those stories nonetheless do keep you from the present moment, do keep you from being awake.
Yes. And do keep you from figuring out that, gee, we outnumber the guy who says that he owns us.
Yes, there's that too.
There's that too. Yeah, one of the things that's remarkable about the Middle Ages is the infrequency of peasant revolts. Not that it didn't happen, but it didn't happen as often as one would think that it would happen. But that gets us off into different things as well.
Yeah, here's one about at least the present culture, which is there's an amazing assumption that being obsessed by entertainment and hobbies is acute addiction.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Look at how we admire people who are obsessed by that. Sports. Think about the people who are totally enamored of watching other people play sports.
And how it's supposed to be cool to be an enthusiastic fan.
Yeah, and to spend millions of dollars. I have to say, and this probably means I'm a mutant, I have never been able to understand that. It's like, why would I want to watch a bunch of people play a game?
I think entertainment is also not necessarily like, it doesn't always feel good, you know, like people who enjoy doing things that feel cathartic. Like that was my addiction to music, was that it provoked feelings in me. I got to get wrapped up in those emotions that were provoked by what I was listening to, rather than dealing with whatever was currently going on with me. It was like adding spice or adding catharsis, and those things can be really ungrounding when you are constantly indulging in them.
Yep. And you can pretend that there's meaning to them.
Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah. You get to build stories around those provoked experiences.
Yes. And you have that in sports as well. The wonderful feeling when your, quote, team wins versus the horrible, terrible feeling when your team loses. And actually pretending that means something. Have you considered how weird that actually is? This group of people over here that I have no connection to other than I'm wearing clothes that have their name on them, have won or lost a game. And that determines my feelings.
Mm-hmm. And more so with players getting traded and teams getting traded around. So there's even less local connection.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you can't enjoy sports. I enjoy watching people fence, mostly because I want to steal their good moves. But I have a direct connection to that because the next week I'm going to be doing what they're doing, right? Or I'm watching them because I'm at the same tournament as them and I'm taking a break from being out on the lists, and I'm enjoying watching my fellow competitors play and stealing all their moves.
Same thing as having a team loyalty.
And would you call your engagement in a fencing match an entertainment?
I would not, because you can't really be, you can't take time to be entertained. Oh, Zainab needs to leave in a few minutes. We are so sorry, Zainab.
I think we need a speech from Zainab before she goes, though.
Yeah, say something.
All the eyes are on you now, Zainab.
I just had a little experience last night when I was sleeping next to my son, and all of a sudden I could feel his breath. But then my thoughts started coming up that, oh, that's nice, and then I was dragged away. Yeah, I just thought to share this. That constantly for me with my experience is that entertaining thought comes up and distracts me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to answer your question, Ilmar, if I am fencing, I am not being entertained. I have a guy who's trying to hit me with a 3-pound piece of steel. This is not entertaining.
And your engagement in fencing is not a way of avoiding, presumably sitting there and going, oh.
No, my engagement in fencing is a form of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I meditate in such a way that the point of my sword hits the other guy.
Mm-hmm. And let's say there's another person, Mushtaq too, who uses fencing as an escape of some sort. Where's the difference between those two? Is it the degree of presence that you have in your fencing?
The difference is that other guy would lose a lot and probably not enjoy himself. Though, hanging out with the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism, which is a good place to get a lot of fencing matches, you will have people that get lost in their persona as, a 14th century Spaniard or a 15th century Italian or a 10th century whatever. But when you are on the piste, when you are out there and you are across from this other person and you are contesting with them, if you want to win the match, you have to be awake. You cannot be lost in entertainment or fantasy. And this is probably true in the doing of any sport. This is not me ragging on sports. I'm all for people doing sports. But think about the difference between you dancing tango with a beautiful woman or watching somebody dance tango with a beautiful woman.
Well, I can certainly see the difference. I mean, what I'm trying to sharpen up is what the difference is between being in a state of presence and whatever you're doing, whether it's fencing or listening to music or just going on, and doing the same thing in a way that is a distraction. And I guess I'm still trying to get what the critical difference here is. I mean, I can sense a difference. I mean, I can certainly.
Well, what's the difference between you dancing with somebody and you watching two people dance?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I watch two people fence, it feels entertaining if it's a good match.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, as a participant in the sport, there's more that goes on.
Yeah.
Especially because the guy who I'm watching, I may be fencing him next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the woman. If the other nice thing about my sport is that there is no gender differentiation. You get out on the strip, you get in the circle, and whoever is on the other side of the circle, it doesn't matter who they are, how old they are, what gender they are, what color they are. They're the other person with the sword. And I love that about it, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, hypothetically, if you had someone who's a serious fencer, but they use that to, and they're focused when they're fighting, but the rest of their life is not going well, and the fencing is a distraction from that.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. So I don't know where this fits in the schema of being in the present moment.
My experience with that for myself is that for me, martial arts have always been the antidote for that.
Okay.
It's like, and this goes not just for fencing. Fencing is just my passion at the moment because it's an art that I can do regardless of how old I am. As long as I am young enough to pick up a sword, I can fence. And but with any art, it's like feeling bad, practice more. Feeling good, practice more.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling distracted, practice more. And the thing is that becomes the practice. And I think that it's an interesting question because yes, you could probably use it as a distraction, but I'm not sure that it would be as good a distraction as other things because it demands that you be present while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the demand to be present is what's at issue here. I mean, even if I'm doing some weird meditation where I'm just counting my breath, I mean, it's the demand to be present to my breath, which presumably makes a difference between that and just simply spacing out.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of meditations that put you to sleep.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about that. I mean, meditations that require you to recite a mantra over and over again, that's called hypnotic induction by boredom.
Yeah.
You go to sleep just to get away from doing what you're doing, which is tedious. So not all meditation is the same. Some meditations wake you up, some meditations put you to sleep. Neither are good or bad. They just are what they are.
But so it looks like there's a class of activities which have a built-in demand for you to be present. In your fencing situations, if you're not present, you get hit, right?
Yes.
Somebody might want to go for, a different kind of martial arts. Somebody might even want to go join the Marines, right? As a way of...
Well, and that's something that we saw after World War II, after the Korean War, after Vietnam, probably after the present debacles in the Middle East. People come back having found flow states in the middle of battle, and then they don't know how to get them otherwise. This is something that after Vietnam, me and my friends talked about a lot, is this whole thing of, how do you recapture that absolute freedom of running through the jungle with everybody shooting at you and you shooting at everybody else and being in complete flow? Because if you're not in complete flow, you're dead. You might be dead anyway, but the only chance you have to survive is to be in that flow state.
So is that then a basic addiction? An addiction to being in a flow state?
There is a very dark side to being in flow states. And we know that because people kill themselves all the time trying to re-achieve those states. And I think that is because they don't understand the mechanics of how to get there. I mean, pretty much every extreme athlete is a flow state junkie. You know, people do crazy shit like jump off mountains with wingsuits, and they die on a regular basis. The best of them die on a regular basis. But they keep doing it because when you hit that flow state, everything kind of comes together, and they don't know any other way to do it because we've lost the technology for re-achieving that. We don't teach it anymore. And I would suggest that there are a number of ways to get into flow state where you don't necessarily have to get killed. Certain kinds of dance are very conducive to entering into flow. David, what dance have you found that really brings you into that state?
Well, there's always contact improv. I was also noticing that during a samba class this past week, I was getting into a more flow just because I had to it was so hard to keep up because it was so fast that I just had to, it got better because I let go in a certain way. Instead of paying attention to what I was learning, I was just going a little faster than I could usually think.
Yeah, and you didn't even have to jump off of a cliff.
Nope.
Yeah, there's an interesting book called The Rise of Superman that examines flow state in extreme athletes. And there's a whole chapter in that book on the dark side of flow. So if that's an interest to you, I recommend that book.
What was the name of it again?
The Rise of Superman.
And so is it possible that this feeling of withdrawal is pretty much always a withdrawal from something like a flow state? Because in a sense, being purely present here and now is kind of being in a flow state also.
Yeah, it's the first step to it. So
right.
Yeah, you may be onto something there.
Yeah.
Neurochemical stuff is always happening in our brains, you know.
Yep.
Like we are constantly being rewarded or deterred from activities that we partake in because our bodies are programmed to react in those ways, or we habituate them to things in those ways.
Yep, and when we reward ourselves with distracting entertainment, we get some pretty significant dopamine releases.
Mm.
And dopamine is highly addictive. We all like our dopamine. This is, I think, a major reason why people get so deeply involved in politics, because they get dopamine hits when they have agreement. When somebody on Fox News tells you something that you agree with, you get a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody on HuffPost tells you something that you agree with, you get a dopamine hit. and it's measurable, it's demonstrable. And in order to keep getting those hits, you have to keep going back and having your opinions reinforced from the outside.
Yep.
And it becomes a form of entertainment.
Yeah, but why do you get that hit? I mean, it's almost like there's something comforting, I think, about feeling that you're not the only one holding that position. Is that what's going on?
I don't know, because I don't actually get those kinds of hits from politics.
Well, but in general, when we get these dopamine hits, right? I mean, what is it that's? I mean, why do they come up? I mean,
Well,
that's a good question, and we probably have to go back to Paleolithic times to look at, when was that a survival trait? It's not a survival trait now. It's like the opposite of a survival trait now, but there had to have been a time when that was a survival trait.
well, certainly being part of the community and the tribe was very much a survival trait.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons why that would be something that would be chemically reinforced, right? I don't know if anyone saw the post I made recently about outrage on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So for those who are familiar, or who aren't familiar, what the research showed in the studies that were talked about in that NPR, I think it was a podcast, was that outrage on the internet, when you get mad at someone and you verbally call them out or you verbally punish them somehow, that act of punishing gives you a dopamine hit. And what they hypothesized was that, thousands and thousands of years ago, there was an incentive to make sure that the person who behaved badly was called out, punished somehow. But the thing is, in a small, tight-knit community, there are incentives to do that and not do that. Like, you don't want to push the person away. You have to see them all the time. They're part of your group. You can't escape them unless you kick them out of the group, and then they might die. But if that's not the goal and you're just trying to correct their behavior, you're not trying to push them away so that you never have to see them again. Whereas on the internet, we're never seeing the results of the things that we say, not directly. We're not seeing their facial expressions. We're not seeing them change their behavior possibly. We just say what we want to say, get the chemical hit that produces, and then go on our way. And that can be addicting.
And fairly safe, because they're not going to come bonk you in the head. Because
exactly right. Yeah. There's no real life or death repercussions in that.
Yeah, and they're very surprised when it turns out that there are real life repercussions of that.
Yeah, because the fact is that what happens is you get this upswell of outrage, but it doesn't have an impact that creates desired change. It really just reinforces the behaviors that are already happening, both in the reward and in the punishing, because the person being punished is like, who is this person? They're a terrible person. Why do I have to listen to them? So we all become more ingrained in the behaviors that we're demonstrating. Does that make sense?
Mm. Well, except that when a person gets mobbed badly enough online, sometimes they do just give up.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's a lot about online interactions and the dopamine hits that ultimately there's a lack of accountability going on in a lot of directions as a result of the fact that people do not have to face each other.
I wonder whether that points to one possible characteristic of, I don't know, I guess what you would call distracted behavior, what I would just call unproductive behavior, in the sense that it doesn't produce the intended result. I mean, it's not, and it doesn't. You can't reasonably expect it to produce the intended result. And if I'm going back from the store and just mulling through my head about weird shit, that doesn't produce any kind of useful result. If I'm coming back from the store and plotting, okay, well, how am I going to put this piece together and in what room, that probably is a productive thing and isn't really so much a distraction. It's more, a mental activity, which is, I would say, a perfectly okay one to be engaged in. And as long as I'm aware that's what I'm doing.
Nothing that we've talked about isn't okay to do.
I understand, but we still have a pejorative sense of saying, okay, here's a distraction from, there's, you're not giving us a neutral talk here. You're giving us
it's hard to talk about these things in a neutral way, especially when our goal here is to be awake. And
right.
Things that get in the way of that goal in particular are going to be talked about in a way that puts them in that context.
Right.
Yeah. But we also believe in freedom of religion. And if somebody wishes to worship the goddess Maya, that's their business.
Yeah. And we all do
She's a
sometimes.
perfectly fine goddess.
Yeah.
The real issue is, I guess, given that the goal is to be awake, then the issue seems to be, is that activity that you're engaging in one that moves you towards that or away from that, right? If it moves you away from that, that's what you would probably call a distraction, maybe even. A distraction from being awake to the present here and now.
Yeah.
And stuff which moves you towards it, maybe, or as neutral, maybe, is not necessarily a distraction, but, kind of a normal.
I operate from the assumption that the awake state is the natural state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that any state that is not the awake state is not the natural state.
Right.
Any state that is not the awake state is an event in your life as opposed to a place where you live.
Right. But also, almost any event that happens to you, you can be present to, and at that point it becomes part of what's here and now, that you're completely present to it. It can even be the weirdest mental confabulation, but if you're aware of it going on and intentionally engaging in that.
If it is now.
Yeah.
So being aware of yourself mourning over your first dog's death 20 years after the fact, even if you're aware of yourself doing it, it's not in the present. It's not awake. You are lost in the past.
But notice, even in that case, when you make the shift from being engaged in that loss of your dog to noticing that you're mourning the loss of your dog, there's that shift that can happen. Once you make that shift, once you step back from it, and it becomes an object of your consciousness rather than something that you're sucked into.
That's kind of what I've been saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately you guys are heading in the same direction.
Oh, I bet we are.
Yeah.
I mean, who could not be in the same direction as this great man here? I mean, all of this is just a distraction from that anyway. So,
well,
all of you are just part of the dance.
That's right. That's right. And that's actually true. Yeah, that's actually
of course
true.
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about Dave Wardell wrote about overclocking various capacities.
Say that one more time. I
Yeah,
caught the overclocking, but I didn't hear what we were overclocking.
Various capacities. The mind, the body. I think he had a third one, but I don't remember what it was. So if you're overclocking something, that could be a flow state, but maybe it's not the best sort of flow state?
Well, overclocking a CPU will make the CPU run faster and shorten its life.
Right.
Interestingly, this week, a new study has come out that shows that an overactive mind, a person with an overactive mind will tend to not live as long as a person who has a quiet mind.
Yeah, I need to look at that thing. I mean, just looking at the headlines, I was wondering whether maybe a quote unquote overactive mind is actually an inefficient mind.
Maybe. My hope is that that will upset enough people that there will be several studies done and we'll actually know something approximating the truth of the matter. I'm pretty sure that a calm mind is actually good for you, though. Funny, you've been so quiet. Say things to us.
I guess what I was thinking about was when I started to observe myself or catch myself when I was slipping into my mechanical behaviors versus being present, was that when I was being present, I was feeling anxious often. So when I was feeling present, especially when I was working or seeing a new client and that sort of thing, I was sort of getting anxious, and I don't know, it felt like it was very raw.
That's very interesting. And I'm pretty sure that you would not be alone in having that experience.
Nope.
Yeah, it ends up being a bit of a fight because I want to be awake and present, and so I'm not really sure what the solution is, but I guess I've tried to keep the positive talk and things like that. But if you have any tips, otherwise, I'll take them.
Well, tips we will have to save for another time. But I do have a few tips for you. I'm just not going to tell you on camera.
Fair enough.
And
it's about that time, isn't it?
It is about that time, yes.
Yes.
But I have one more important question for you, Funny. Do you know how to make meatballs?
I do. I do very well.
Ah, yet another reason to go to Sydney.
The man wants
Or
his
invite
Swedish
me to the
meatballs.
States.
Or
Yeah.
invite you to the States, yes. We can get the ingredients.
Yes.
So, it's probably time for commercials. Da, da, da.
Okay, so one thing we've got going on is that I've relaunched the Nine-Sided Circle Twitter. So that's a thing. You can find it at sided9. That's one word.
Yes.
And
I put a link to it up in the forum.
Yep. And
You should all follow us.
Yeah. I mean, mine's in that post as well as is Mushtak's new one. So you can follow all three of those.
Yeah.
Yep. 9, what is it? Sided9, Consulting Derv 1, and then mine is Light Goes Rogue. So. Yep.
Yeah.
What else?
We have still not filled up the people who would like to do the new Enneagram class, which is a free class to anybody who is a member of the forum. You don't have to pay a penny for it. The only thing that we ask is that you attend all of the classes unless an emergency comes up. You know,
Yeah.
if you got to rush your significant other to the hospital because they have just terminally stubbed their toe, we will understand. But other than that, you know, we would like you to be there for all of them, because this stuff works best when we can dialogue about it, as opposed to just me or Noor sitting there talking about it.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And I think that we're about half full right now, and I would like, you know, if I can find 10 people who'd want to do it, 10 people would be great.
So take us up on that.
Take us up on that.
What else?
The ongoing special.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Tell us about the ongoing special, Noor.
All right. So you can work with either of us. And if you commit to 6 sessions, you can pay us a total of $300 for those 6 sessions, which is a discount from the full price of $100 per session. And either of us are available at that rate. And we have time for you if you want to work with us.
Yeah, so there. And this month's alms.
Yes.
Yes. A reminder that you have a chance to win a 9-sided circle t-shirt, which is very artsy.
In the size and color of your choice.
Yes. Or in the size of and color of my choice, depending on, you know, any number of factors. And it gives you access to this month's secret talk, which will be on the Enneagram of the different kinds of intelligence.
Yeah.
Which is going to be, if I do say so myself, really good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to working on that.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who's donated already, thank you very much. And we look forward to sending out the talk to you, or, you know, perhaps sending you a t-shirt if you win it. And for those of you who haven't donated yet, feel free, as little or as much as you'd like.
Yeah. The donation should be anywhere between $1 and $1 million.
So, anything else?
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, as always, everyone, thank you for being here and for spending time with us and for participating. We all benefit from that. So it's really great to have that.
Yep. It's one of the things that makes this different than most of the stuff you find on YouTube, for instance, is that we actually do this as a dialogue.
Mm.
Because 10 heads are better than 1. So, with no further ado, I wave good night to you all, and we will see you next week.